December 2009, a famous young star ends up dying on the bathroom floor. At first, Brittany Murphy's death was just another LA tragedy, but when her husband died in the same Hollywood mansion 5 months later, Brittany's final curtain call is rewritten.
That was one of the most surprising things in Hollywood history.
It's now a mystery even Tinseltown couldn't have dreamed up.
There was something destructive going on.
Rumors of toxic mold, drug overdose, even deliberate poisoning.
She was murdered.
So what or who killed Brittany Murphy? I'm Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris. I'm a medical historian and best-selling author with a PhD in the history of science and medicine from Oxford University. I've written about the pioneering days of surgery, about syphilis, plagues, and pandemics, and even books made of human skin. Some might say I'm obsessed with the macabre and with death, but I think the way people die tells us a whole lot about how they lived. I'm going to explore some of history's most famous lives by looking at them through their extremely curious deaths. This is my investigation room, and here is my science lab where Dr. Rachel Burks will be doing tests and experiments for me. And here is where my crime-solving partner, former Scotland Yard detective Brian Hook, helps me piece together my investigations. Call it biography with a twist, a biography from the morgue. Hollywood, Los Angeles, a place where people come in search of fame, fortune, and Facebook lights. A place where dreams are made, and is often unmade, because the price of fame is steep and there are pitfalls under those palm trees. One star had it all. To her fans, Brittany Murphy appeared to be a flawless Hollywood princess. But behind the red carpet smiles, her career cratered mysteriously, and then she was dead. She was just 32. People were saying the death itself was unnatural, no accident, even murder. As if this wasn't enough to get tongues wagging, her husband also died in the same house just 5 months later. Brittany Murphy's life and death were, well, curious. From the moment she dies, stories in the press become increasingly sensational. I want to separate the truth from the tabloid news. This case has so many intriguing medical facets, I think it merits serious examination. So I'm going to combine medical science with detective work to find out how and why she ended up in a place like this. Brittany Murphy was born in 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. Brittany and her divorced mother, Sharon, arrived in the City of Dreams when she was in her early teens. Hollywood insider and journalist Sandro Manetti can give us the backstory of her life.
Brittany Murphy came from a broken home. Her parents broke up at the age of 2. She found her salvation in song and dance, mostly in acting. Brittany knew from an early age she wanted to be in Hollywood as a performer. But she was in New Jersey, living with her mom, Sharon. So, what did she do? She sold up all her possessions and she moved to Hollywood.
Brittany's breakthrough came in 1995 when she starred as Ty, the naive new girl at a Hollywood high school in the hit movie Clueless.
Clueless had a huge impact, and one of its best aspects was the performance of Brittany Murphy.
Yeah, it's called Clueless, and it's about, growing up in the 90s.
She shone through the screen. She was like champagne glass on a tea tray, and the whole world fell in love with Brittany Murphy.
Just looking at her resume, you get a real flavor of Brittany's success. After Clueless, the big roles start flooding in. She gets third listing to Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder in the 1999 critical hit Girl Interrupted. And in 2001, she's in Don't Say a Word, starring the Hollywood legend Michael Douglas. Before too long, she's the one who's box office. The movies are getting bigger and grossing more and more. Uptown Girls grosses $37 million. Just Married with Ashton Kutcher, $56 million. Sin City, $75 million. And she's the female lead beside Eminem in 8 Mile, taking $119 million. Brittany is a genuine A-lister now. One of the last to work with her is Alex Merkin, director of the 2009 indie movie Across the Hall. He agreed to talk about Brittany for the first time on camera.
She just had some of the qualities of a femme fatale that you hope for. She's really intelligent, incredibly talented, but she's deceptively delicate and light, but has that sort of killer instinct and that sort of danger behind her eyes when she wants to turn that on.
But just weeks after the premiere of Alex Merkin's picture, a horror movie scene was playing out in real life inside Brittany's Hollywood home. In the early hours of December 20th, 2009, the emergency services received a panicked call from Brittany's mother. It's shocking to listen to.
My daughter's passed out. Please get here quick,
okay,
please.
okay. We're gonna send somebody out there, okay? Is she breathing?
No!
Look inside her mouth and check for food or vomit.
Threw up tons of stuff.
Is she taking any kind of medications at all?
What?
Is she taking no medications, nothing?
Please, why aren't they here?
My chief investigator, former Scotland Yard homicide detective Brian Hook, has been looking into the circumstances of Brittany's death. Wow, Brian, that was really distressing. As an ex-cop, you must hear phone calls like that all the time. Do you ever get used to it?
No, you never ever get used to that. The fear, the confusion, the panic, raw human emotion.
It was awful. Now tell me, was Brittany Murphy alive when the paramedics arrived at her house?
Yes, Brittany was alive when they arrived, but she was unresponsive. So she was taken by ambulance to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and was pronounced dead. Ed Winter, the coroner for LA County, makes an announcement to the world's press outside of Brittany's mansion in Hollywood Hills.
We're conducting an investigation into the death of Brittany Murphy. It appears to be natural at this time. We'll be conducting an autopsy tomorrow or Tuesday. We'll have to analyze everything and go from there.
So there's no cause of death at this stage?
No, coroner Ed Winter says he's going to wait for 4 to 6 weeks before the lab results come back to actually determine the real cause of death. Significantly, prescription drugs were taken from her home as evidence, and that just sends the press into total overdrive.
Yeah.
32-year-old actress Brittany Murphy died
today, apparently of cardiac arrest.
There are a lot of questions this morning.
Stroke or a bleed, heart attack or arrhythmia.
Rumors of an eating disorder.
She had a lot of inner demons, a lot of self-image issues.
Rumors of drug use and, as you said, anorexia, that sort of thing.
Correct.
Was it drug-related? There's a lot of speculation about it.
This is another weird thing. On the death certificate, it says that Brittany's father is unknown.
We do know who her father is. He was Angelo Bertolotti, allegedly an ex-mob guy. It suggested that Brittany's mother didn't want his name on the death certificate because Brittany had fallen out with him. She actually hadn't spoken to him since 2006.
So Brittany's parents are estranged, possibly hostile towards each other. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yes, I think you're right.
It's time to meet Brittany. I want to find out what she can tell me about the night in her bathroom at home with her mom and her husband. To help me investigate the mystery of her death, I've had this dummy made out of gel, which has the same qualities as a human body, with heart, lungs, brain, stomach, skeleton, and blood. Brittany died so young, just 32 years old. But under her exquisite makeup and expensive haircut, she's just the same as any woman. Her body would have behaved like anyone her age. I'm going to use it to find out why and how a young woman in the prime of her life appears to suddenly drop dead. When the coroner's office releases the autopsy report, the results show anemia, multiple drug intoxication, and pneumonia caused by the bacteria Staphylococcus aureus. Even without the pending toxicology investigation, there's dozens of pages in Brittany's post-mortem record, so I really need some help making sense of it all. Dr. Judy Melinek is a forensic pathologist who has pronounced in over 2,500 cases. Dr. Melinek, this is a familiar but unconventional space for you, isn't it?
It is.
Where do you start?
We start with the external examination. We look on the outside of the body to see if there's any signs of injury. And in Brittany Murphy's case, there was no sign of injury. The next step is to do the autopsy to figure out if there's any sign of disease.
And that would tell you whether there was any underlying condition that could have contributed to the cause of her death.
Or been the cause of death, correct.
I know this is just a model, but can you show me on this where the coroner would have started?
Absolutely.
The death of film star Brittany Murphy in 2009 was immediately considered suspicious. With the help of a virtual cadaver, forensic pathologist Dr. Judy Melinek is guiding me through the coroner's autopsy.
So we go from shoulder to shoulder and then cut down the middle of the abdomen and we remove the skin.
And would this actually be quite bloody in a real cadaver?
There is blood, but because the person's dead, it's not pumping out. It just pours out from gravity. So after reflecting the skin, you'd see the chest cavity encased in the ribs, and then I would slice the ribs open using a rib cutter or lopper.
They look like garden shears.
They are garden shears. We got them at a gardening store, actually.
Wow. Ooh.
And then we lift up the rib cage to expose the organs underneath. The lungs and the heart are now visible. So then I would lift the lungs up out of the chest cavity in order to remove them and weigh them. So this would be a normal-sized lung, nice and pink. We know that standard lungs are around 250 to maybe 400 grams. In Brittany Murphy's case, her right lung weighed 1,230 grams, so it's almost 6 times normal size. Wow. And the left lung was 760 grams, so it was also heavier than normal. It would indicate pneumonia, that the lungs have filled in with both fluid and immune system cells, and that's why they're so much heavier.
Bacterial pneumonia, the disease which plays a part in Brittany's death, nowadays is widely treatable with antibiotics. But of course, it wasn't always this way. Throughout the 19th and into the early 20th centuries, pneumonia killed indiscriminately, striking fear into the hearts of both patients and doctors. It carried a case fatality rate of 30 to 40%. The first antibacterial agent shown to be effective against pneumonia was called sulfapyridine. Developed in the 1930s, it was likely used to treat Winston Churchill's bout of pneumonia in 1943, arguably saving his life and changing the entire course of World War II. Penicillin and other effective drugs soon followed, transforming pneumonia into a largely manageable condition. Nevertheless, about 250,000 people are admitted to hospitals each year in the US with pneumonia, and the infection claims around 50,000 lives annually. Pneumonia is intrinsically linked to the larger viral epidemics of our time, including SARS and the COVID-19 pandemic. Patients with either of these viruses can get life-threatening pneumonia, making it easy to see why such outbreaks can still cause mass panic. Pneumonia can be contracted by anyone, anywhere, as we now know. Pneumonia is a particularly nasty disease to die from, especially if you're under the influence of prescription medication like Brittany Murphy. My expert chemical analyst, Dr. Rachel Burks, explains what was happening to her on the night that she died. So Rachel, can you tell me exactly what was going on in Brittany's body?
There were a cocktail of drugs inside her body. For starters, 2 anti-seizure drugs.
What would the impact on her body be?
These could severely weaken her ability to oxygenate blood. This particular bacteria, Staph A, causes microabscesses in the lungs, further affecting her respiration, releasing poison into her bloodstream, causing septicemia and dangerously high temperature. The bacteria is multiplying faster and faster to the point where the infection becomes overwhelming. Brittany would have gone to the final stage of septic shock. Her lungs are filling with fluid. She'd be in great distress by now.
We know that at around 7:45 in the morning, her mother, Sharon Murphy, calls for help, but it's too little, too late. And so, collapsed on her bathroom floor, This is the moment that Brittany Murphy reached the point of no return. I need to go back in time and figure out, where did this terrible end begin? My chief investigator, Brian Hook, is a specialist in unexplained deaths.
If you find out how people have lived, you will find out how they've died. They're inextricably linked.
Their personal lives are really important.
Yes. Initially, she's dating some very high-profile people, such as Marshall Mathers, who we know as Eminem.
All right, okay.
Ashton Kutcher.
Everybody knows who he is.
Film executives, very, very influential people high up in the film industry.
Real power couples.
She's dating people that really could have an influence on her career.
Then, suddenly, in 2006, someone walks into Brittany's world and everything changes. From the get-go, the grapevine crackled with unflattering gossip about her new boyfriend.
When Simon Monjack arrived in Brittany's life, all the Hollywood community had one question. Who the hell is this guy? He described himself as a director, a screenwriter, a photographer, but he seems to be very short of money. He was evicted from 2 previous apartments for not paying back rent. He had 2 ex-wives who claimed that he owed them money. He owed a huge amount to a bank in his native Britain, and he'd recently overstayed his visa.
In fact, Brittany has known Simon on and off since she was 17, when he was hired to take pictures of her for a magazine. Now they begin a whirlwind romance. It looks like Brittany has finally found true love. But to Simon's mother, Linda, it seemed that below the surface there was a hidden dimension to their relationship. She agreed to talk to us and share her unique perspective on Brittany's personality.
She was an innocent. She was very fearful of everything. I think that you would find, historically, if you went through everybody that she knows, she was wanting to be looked after. And Simon was quite happy to be that person in that role.
After only a few months, the pair get married. It gets rid of his immigration problem and helps him out of his financial situation. It's the classic Cinderella story, only Simon is the one who goes from rags to riches. And of course, once Brittany and Simon tie the knot, he moves into her Hollywood home.
What you're looking at here is the Hollywood dream come to reality. When Brittany Murphy made it, she wanted to get the ultimate house, and she found it here at 1895 Rising Glen, high above iconic Sunset Boulevard. Brittany moved in with her mother. And even when Simon Monjack comes into the picture, her mother Sharon continues to live with them. It's an unusual arrangement, isn't it, for the newlyweds to have the bride's mother with them as well.
I'm not surprised Brittany would want someone she trusted close to her at all times. But this is what intrigues me. When Simon comes on the scene, they seem to become a threesome, with Brittany in the middle, bookended by 2 strong personalities. I can't go inside Brittany's home because it's since been rebuilt, but I can get a sense of what happened there from this bizarre footage we've uncovered. It's Simon Monjack taking a film crew around the house soon after his wife's death.
The house was very dark, like a mausoleum. Didn't look like a happy place where 2 young people were living. There was extensive mold on the windows. It was doomy, gloomy, miserable, terrible atmosphere.
One room I'm really interested in is where Brittany collapsed.
Yeah, you're the first people to ever see the infamous bathroom.
I mean, look at all of those products she's got. There is stuff everywhere. There are shampoos, there's lots of makeup. It looks almost like a hoarder's bathroom. The private sanctuary of a woman insecure about the way she looks. From the fully fledged movie star to the wannabe actor waiting tables, in Hollywood, image is everything. You might think that we in the 21st century are uniquely obsessed with our appearances, yet people in the past were equally eager to turn back the clock. Elixirs for improving your appearance proliferated in the 18th century. Everything from hair restoring creams to slimming pills, each claiming to be a miracle cure. Many remedies were invented to conceal telltale signs of disease. For instance, women covered skin lesions caused by syphilis with beauty spots made of mouse skin. The Victorians were no less vain than their 18th century counterparts. Late 19th century newspapers advertised tins of arsenic complexion wafers, which were just that, little white chalk wafers filled with arsenic for delicate nibbling. The wafers made the skin fashionably pale by destroying red blood cells. Advertising encouraged ladies not to be nervous, but long-term exposure to small doses of arsenic is extremely unpleasant. It can cause kidney damage, hair loss, growths called arsenical keratosis, and pigment loss called vitiligo. Victorian products were full of poison, and even radium became a fad in the beauty industry after it was discovered by Marie Curie in 1898. It appeared in all kinds of products like cigarettes, lipsticks, and even toothpaste, right up into the 1950s. Radiation has an indiscriminate destructive effect on the human body. But luckily, these beauty products had such low levels of radioactivity that they neither worked nor did much harm. It all makes Botox seem like child's play. Brittany Murphy's bathroom would have been even more crowded, but it was reported that stacks of pill bottles had been removed by the police. Allegedly dozens of them. Brian has found us some intel on the contents of these bottles.
I've been doing some research into the amount of prescription medication Brittany was taking prior to her death. This leaked report shows she's been buying hundreds of pills each month. It makes astounding reading.
In the aftermath of film star Brittany Murphy's sudden death, the Hollywood grapevine buzzed with reports of drug abuse. My chief investigator, Brian Hook, has unearthed a leaked document that backs up those rumors.
Look at this, 120 hydrocodone tablets prescribed 11 days before her death. And the day she died, there's only 11 pills left. That's 109 tablets gone.
Wow, in such a short period.
If she'd been taking it according to the prescription, she should have only taken 44 pills.
Oh, wow. Less than half. And that's a powerful drug.
Yeah, and it just goes on. Hundreds of pills a month are being prescribed, both in her name and for nearly 2 years before her death to a Lola Manilow Murphy.
Does that person, Lola Manilow Murphy, exist?
No, that's got to be a pseudonym. And in 1 month, that pseudonym was prescribed 200 hydrocodone, 100 clonazepam,
wow,
hundreds and hundreds of pills.
Even if half of this is true, it's quite alarming, wouldn't you say?
Drug abusers will use pseudonyms, they'll go to different pharmacies, they'll recruit family members just to get that medication.
Within a mile radius of Brittany's home in Hollywood, she has access to dozens of pharmacies. Expand the net to 3 miles, there are even more. I've learned she plundered one in particular, Eddie's on Beverly Boulevard.
Brittany Murphy presented herself as clean cut, the girl next door. But like a lot of Hollywood stars, she had a secret. This pharmacy is where Brittany Murphy got her drugs, and lots of them. Brittany, Simon, and Sharon would be seen here twice a week. The owner was once quoted as saying of the Murphys, "They might have more drugs in their house than I have in the entire drugstore." Those are sobering words.
This revelation backs up the autopsy findings that a major factor in Brittany's death was multiple drug intoxication. I'm wondering what drug intoxication might mean. Is that an overdose? I've given this to my regular scientific investigator, Dr. Rachel Burks. Rachel, what do the labs tell us?
She had quite a cocktail of substances on board.
Yeah, so would these have caused some of the symptoms that we're seeing with her?
It could have. All of these have a huge list of side effects, and it leads to how it's so complicated to manage.
Yeah, it seems like she was just juggling so much here and that there was a lot of potential for mistakes. She was self-medicating when she was ill a few days before.
Well, we all tend to self-medicate as far as like, I'll take an aspirin or acetaminophen or something like that. But when you do that with prescription drugs, it's very complicated chemistry.
Are there any drugs here that concern you?
There's one in particular that concerns me, and that's the hydrocodone. In the US, there's a huge opiate crisis, and that is one of the most abused prescription drugs. This is in the same class as heroin or morphine, which really sets off alarm bells because it's extremely addictive. So again, how is she managing all of this and that really powerful opiate? That's what really concerns me.
We've discovered that Eddie's pharmacy actually cut off the family's supply 4 months before Brittany's death. And they weren't the only ones who were seriously worried about how they were affecting her. Nearing the end of 2006, around the time she starts dating Simon Munjak, the big studio offers stop coming in. Brittany is forced to accept low-budget B-movie roles.
If the hits keep coming, people will put up with a lot. But if the movies aren't as successful, then the drawbridge can go up very quickly on a Hollywood career. Brittany started to show a lot of erratic behavior, and the dream to work with that she was suddenly a nightmare experience. And so people weren't as keen to hire her as they were before.
2009's Across the Hall was yet another small indie movie. Director Alex Merkin himself was a first-time director. But he reveals in our exclusive interview how even he was exasperated by Brittany's erratic behavior.
Things were becoming increasingly more difficult and bizarre. She might do one performance that was great. The next take, it's a completely different emotional output. The turn always felt like it happened after she spent some time with Simon alone and then returned. From my understanding, she didn't have internet service or a cell phone, and he controlled information that was coming her way in order to keep her from spiraling down some sort of dark hole. When you get into major mood swings or paranoid moments, you can only speculate about what could be behind something like that.
Alex does recall one deeply troubling incident.
One day on set, somebody wandered into Brittany's green room, and there was a mirror that was sitting on top of her director's chair, and it very oddly had a streak of white powder and a cut straw. I have to say very clearly that this was not a locked set that only she had access to, but it was certainly an alarming thing, and we definitely took it very seriously, and we had to make a report of it.
With no witnesses, the studio report was inconclusive. But because Hollywood stars live their lives under a relentless spotlight, we've been able to find disturbing footage of Brittany just 19 days before she died, attending the premiere of Across the Hall.
Do you find it easier to film comedies or thriller?
It all has to do with the story and the director, and that's really where the decisions are made on my behalf. Have a nice day.
Alex confirms Brittany didn't appear to be her normal self that night.
At the premiere, she seemed like she had lost a little weight. You know, she was always a small, petite person, but when she was holding my hands, I just have a memory of a little bit of shakiness. She seemed more fragile than usual.
Do we know when Brittany starts taking opioids?
Might have come up with a reason that's not in her official biography. 1995, Brittany's allegedly involved in a car crash. She suffered broken jaw, broken collarbone, cracked ribs. She would have been in constant pain.
So we're talking about a serious car crash here.
Yes, and it may well be that before she died, she was still suffering that pain.
We know from pill bottles found in her home that Brittany was later prescribed a particularly strong painkiller, Vicaprofen. It was likely her first exposure to opioids, an appetite for which will come back to haunt her. As a species, we've always faced the challenge of how to medicate illness. Treatments for pain and sickness have a long history of being more likely to kill than cure. In the ancient world, surgeons, from the Greek word chirurgia, meaning handiwork, had a unique way of dealing with headaches, epilepsy, and mental health conditions: trepanation. In what can only be described as a crude version of brain surgery, a surgeon would make one or a series of holes in the skull of the still conscious patient. It was thought that, for some, the cranial holes would release demons from the body of the afflicted. In ancient Peru, the patients may have gotten some pain relief during this procedure. While the surgeon cut the hole, often using an obsidian knife, He would chew coca leaves, spitting numbing mixture from his mouth into the wound. As any modern doctor will tell you, having a hole drilled into your head is not recommended for pain relief. Unsurprisingly, many patients died following the procedure. But there were exceptions. Some survived for years after, their skulls eventually healing over the holes. It's even said that trepanning immediately after a head trauma can relieve pressure on the brain and save a patient's life. On February 4th, 2010, 6 weeks after Brittany's death, the coroner's office releases the toxicology report, and the result is shocking. No illegal drugs, but a catalog of prescription meds, 14 powerful substances. This is the full horror of what was coursing through Brittany's veins. And Brian has turned up a bombshell, an interview with none other than Brittany's father, who claims the drugs in her system were no accident.
The fact is that she was poisoned and she was murdered, as far as I'm concerned.
For months after the mysterious death of Brittany Murphy, attention was focused on her drug habit. But there was still a suspicion of foul play. Now, her father makes a full-blown accusation.
She was murdered, as far as I'm concerned.
We've tracked down this contemporary interview in which Angelo Bertolotti demands that his ex-wife, Sharon Murphy, is investigated, questioning why she alone has inherited all of Brittany's estate. Then he's asked if he suspects Sharon was involved in her death. He replied, "Yes, I do." To try and prove his allegation, Brittany's father pays for a new toxicology report conducted on a strand of her hair. What was he looking for?
He requested heavy metals, different metal toxins, and a variety of poisons. Really get a second look.
What did they find?
Chromium, zinc, iron.
What does that tell us?
Not a lot, I'm afraid. Some of these things we just need to survive, and some of them we're just exposed to in our environments.
Anything alarming?
There was one thing that was reported in the second tox screen that was alarming. It was the high levels of barium. It's an element, but it's also found in rat poison.
But is there any evidence of poisoning, though?
Not a whole lot, I'm afraid. Barium, like a lot of chemicals, has multiple uses. Rat poison, hair dye.
So what's the takeaway here?
As a scientist, I'm not dismissing it, but I don't find the second report super suspicious.
Bertolotti's tox report produces no conclusive evidence of foul play in Brittany's death, but doesn't rule it out either. And there's plenty of other suspicious factors I still need to look at.
Let's put up people that are of interest here. Husband, Simon?
It seems like ever since she married Simon, things start to go wrong.
He owed a lot of money to a lot of people. But when he married Brittany, those money troubles went away.
So we can discount that as a motive.
Yes.
And the prescription drugs, what's going on there?
Well, I'm going to add Brittany's mother to the board now.
Okay, and how does she fit into this?
A lot of the drugs that were seized as evidence are in her name.
Could Sharon have been enabling her own daughter in a prescription drug habit?
I think Sharon is a little bit more complex. I'm thinking along the lines of Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a bizarre condition where a carer fakes an illness in the very person they are looking after, harming their victim. I want to talk to an expert to see if this could have been a factor in Brittany and Sharon's relationship. Dr. Mark Feldman has been unraveling this tangled form of abuse for many years. Dr. Feldman, you're an expert in Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Can you tell me what that is?
Yeah, it refers to a situation in which a caregiver, almost always a mother, either claims that her child is sick or actually makes the child sick. And her motive seems to be to get attention, care, concern for herself.
How do you tell whether the child is actually suffering from a real condition versus being manipulated or abused by someone else?
You're faced with the conundrum of trying to distinguish between what's real and what's been lied about. But you know, the best lies, and I'm using best ironically, are those that mix some truth and some fiction. And that's what happens in a lot of these Munchausen by proxy cases.
Do you see it sometimes between a mother and daughter in an adult relationship.
I've been increasingly concerned about adult victims who don't recognize that they're being victimized and may, in a sense, even collude. That is, they trust the perpetrator. And so they do what they're told and they say what they're told to say. And that can be very baffling.
Dr. Feldman, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
I find this a fascinating syndrome, but there's really no evidence Sharon wanted to cause her daughter deliberate harm. On the flip side, she also appears to have done little to prevent Brittany's worsening health, which for a mother is not exactly normal behavior. But there's more. This clip from The Larry King Show from February 2010, a month or so after Brittany's death, but before the official tox report revealed she was loaded full of prescription meds, is, I think, very revealing.
What happened the day she died?
She woke up, she couldn't breathe. She went out to get some air. Sharon followed her out. I'll say this because I know you can't. She said, "Mom, I'm dying, I love you." And
Mom, I'm dying, I love you. She knew she was dying?
From when she collapsed, I was with her in the bathroom, and she said, "Mommy, please hug me." And I went to get up, and she just collapsed, like right there.
Okay, TMZ reported medications found included anti-seizure, migraine medication, Topamax, anti-anxiety meds, Klonopin and Altivan, pain relievers, Vicaprofen and hydrocodone, depression medication, fluoxetine, and the hypermedication propanol.
Yes.
Why?
Well, number one, I suffer from seizures and migraines, so they weren't in her name.
Oh, they were for you?
They were for me.
Do you fear that toxicology might say an overdose of prescription medication?
No.
Is that possible?
No.
Sharon and Simon certainly appear to be in complete denial about Brittany's pill intake. Autopsy evidence clearly details that she'd been prescribed the anti-seizure meds Simon claimed were for him in the Larry King interview. I can't work out if they are deluded, still in shock at Brittany's death, or covering something up. They certainly never deal with Larry King's big question, who were all the drugs for? I really need to get to the bottom of this. Brian, what do we know about Simon's health? Was he well?
Simon had some serious health issues. He was taking medication for epilepsy. Also, Brittany and Simon took a trip to Puerto Rico. They came back early because Simon was ill. On the return journey, he had a suspected heart attack and had to be given oxygen.
Right on the plane?
Right on the plane. When they arrived, the paramedics went on board and he was actually unconscious.
Simon's collapse is a sign of things to come. In the months following Brittany's death, Simon shuts himself off from the world, rarely leaving the house he now shares with Sharon Murphy. Simon's mother, Linda, reveals to us how she was becoming increasingly concerned for his well-being.
Simon was putting on weight, like I've never seen anyone put on weight ever before. He was getting more and more wild in his hair, in his manner, and I felt something was really, really wrong at that point. I spoke to Sharon. I said, "I really think you need to get the doctor out." No, we'll be fine. I said, "Sharon, he's not fine. He really, really isn't fine. I'm his mother and he's not fine. Ring the doctor." And she said, no, he's sleeping now. He's sleeping now. I said, "He could be in a coma, Sharon. Ring 911. She didn't.
Linda's worst nightmare is about to come true. 2 days later, in an unbelievable twist to the tale, it's Simon who faces the same fate as Brittany, dying in the same house with an eerily similar medical diagnosis and in almost identical circumstances. While the world's movie capital was still coming to terms with Brittany Murphy's strange death, her husband, Simon Munjak, collapses and dies, sending shockwaves through Hollywood.
5 months after the death of actress Brittany Murphy, another tragedy strikes that family. Brittany's husband, Simon Munjak, has died.
This is the autopsy report for Simon Munjak, and this is the mind-blowing bit. The cause of death is almost identical to Brittany's, pneumonia. And here, multiple medications. It's not surprising that the Hollywood rumor mill went into overdrive.
Having reported on Hollywood for many years, I think that there's nothing that can shock me. But when Simon Monjack dies, in identical circumstances to the way Brittany Murphy died, that was one of the most surprising things in Hollywood history.
So Brian, what's going on here? Where did he die? Walk us through that.
It's deja vu. Sharon made the 911 call. Listen to this.
What's the problem? What happened?
My son-in-law, he stopped breathing.
Lay him flat on his back on the ground, no pillows.
I can't get on the ground, he's gigantic.
He's gigantic?
Yes.
We're going to do compressions. We're going to do compressions now. Pump the chest hard and fast, at least twice per second.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
By the time the paramedics arrive, Simon is dead. But here's the twist. Later, Sharon is telling everybody Simon and Brittany have died as a result of the mold that's in the house.
The killer mold theory caught the public imagination. Ever since, the press have run and run with the story. But was Sharon right? Could Brittany have been killed by toxic mold? Maybe Dr. Melinek can help me solve the mystery. So these are the two most common molds found in a household. Could this kill someone?
Yes, they can kill someone by causing an inflammatory or allergic reaction.
Did it kill Brittany Murphy?
No, it didn't. What we saw at her autopsy was that she had pneumonia from bacteria.
So a lot of people think that it was the mold in the house because her husband dies 5 months later with pneumonia in the same house.
I reviewed his autopsy as well, and both Brittany Murphy and her husband died of pneumonia from bacteria. Molds are a fungus, they're not a bacteria, different organism.
So it wasn't the mold, nor was it the poison. And nothing suggests to me that she deliberately took her own life. So what killed Brittany Murphy? Overall, there's more speculation than conclusive facts and arguments. Certainly, the family setup is no ordinary one. She's living with a controlling husband who monitors her cell phone, and a neurotic mother who doesn't stop her massive use of prescription drugs. They appear to have become normalized inside the Murphy household. Listen to what Linda says happened at Simon's funeral.
She put a pill in my mouth without asking me. Sharon is so used to taking pills, and I am not. And of course, had I have swallowed that pill, I would have been out of it. I felt it was a very bizarre thing to do, but probably she thought that was a normal thing to do.
It wouldn't be easy after all this time to build a case against Sharon. Although she may have helped to procure the drugs that ultimately brought Brittany down, she faced no investigation into her daughter's or Simon's deaths. Both were classed as accidental, so I can't find the killer evidence.
I've considered the facts my experts have brought to light and thoroughly investigated all the sensational stories. Now it's time for a verdict. Brittany Murphy was yet another prescription drug abuser hidden in plain sight. Crippled by pneumonia, the more medication she took, the weaker she became. In a city full of great hospitals, for reasons we'll never quite know, those closest to her didn't get her the help she needed. That's the eternal mystery. But one thing I'm fairly certain of, she dies a preventable death. Had she been treated with antibiotics early enough, she most likely would have recovered. She was scheduled for a doctor's appointment on Monday, December 21st, 2009, the day after she collapsed. She never made it. The silver screen is famous for its romances and comedies. After examining the evidence, I think Brittany Murphy's story was a more rare genre, a tragedy, played out for real under Hollywood's merciless spotlight.